Good morning. Welcome. Okay, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking Wednesday, welcome. Today is guest day, and you're right. Today, we have Scott Stevens with us. And I want to let you know I'm actually super excited to have him on because of what's been happening lately. But I want to tell you the truth. We had a guest that had an emergency and had to back out in the last 24 hours. And I don't want to tell you the guests because we rebooked them. I'll tell you the guests when that time comes. But right now, I want to tell you, Scott is going to be joining us. And I've wanted to have this conversation so long. I was going to wait till Friday. And then I thought, no, we can have it today and then do Friday. So I want to let you know you are on the Success Secrets for Business, Family, and Life channel. This is the Coffee Break Show. I'm Vickie Helm. That's Scott Stevens. He's my Friday partner. He's my Wednesday guest. And it's brought to you by the Metadime Digital Network. And so you, if you're new here, welcome. If you're on Twitter, if you're on Facebook, if you're on YouTube, we go live on 5 or 6 platforms right now. And I want to welcome you to the show. I want to welcome you to the Metadime Digital Network, where you can see live shows every single day. You'll see the Coffee Break Show. Today, we're going to have another perspective. We have Unlocked with Tracy Wilson. We provide you with the up-to-date information. We share tips, tools, techniques. We share inspiration, motivation, and those things that are going to help you create thrivability in a post-COVID world. And I want to welcome you, Scott, to the show today. Thank you for being here.
Glad to be here. Glad to be here, Vickie. You know, it's a snow day, so obviously our attire has changed from T-shirts to something a little bit
we
warmer.
got long sleeves on. This is my next do good stuff shirt.
Yeah, and I'm looking out my window, looking at my neighbor, trying to undo the damage that our 6, 7, 8 inches of snow that fell yesterday and overnight has done to the property. So I'm like, you know, we're already cleaning up. From this mess. And believe it or not, this school district had its earliest snow day ever, 9 September for a snow day.
Yeah.
WTF.
I know. That's the issue right there. I'm like, we're having so many weather anomalies, and I want to be talking about them as well. Listen, if you're new here, put your name down below and be part of the conversation. And if you are here and a treasured fan of the show, thank you for being here with us every single day. I like this. This right here. Hi, Vickie. Hi, Vickie and Scott. But, you know, she jumped in right away. Hi, Vickie and Scott. Hey, Susie. Nice to see you.
That B and V key are really close together.
They really
with these
are.
Thumbs, I hit it more often than I should.
I know. I get Vickie all the time. It's okay. I type Vickie myself all the time. Let's see. Always a pleasure to see Scott. Thank you for stepping in. Yes. Karen. Hi, friends. Let's see. Oh, my God. They barely started school. That's true. So I want to have a conversation with you, and I want to have it from a very professional standpoint. Everybody's talking about all of the weather changes in the world and the sciences and everything goes with us. I have a meteorologist and a scientist and an investigative journalist. This guy has been doing weather for all his life. As soon as he could say daddy, he said weather. And from that point on, even in his teens, he's been working for ABC, NBC, and CBS affiliates. We have been on this weather journey and meteorology journey together as friends for a long time. It's super fascinating. But I have so many questions, don't you?
I do.
I mean, is it real? Is it not real? What is geoengineering? Can they play with the skies? Can they not? Can they adjust our weather? Why are we seeing so many weather changes? We are going to go deep in that today. We are going to go where nobody usually goes before. Good morning and happy snow day. The number one thing I want to know first, Scott, and I really want this to be the biggest part of the conversation. Why is weather, why does it affect every bit of our economy? Why is it so important to understand weather and politics, weather and commodities, weather and agriculture? What is the tie-in for us all? Can you just give us that?
Well, it impacts every aspect of our life, from food, from school, from transportation, from entertainment. It touches everything. And maybe it's simply because we live at the bottom of this massive thing called the atmosphere. And we can't live without
Air.
breathing that substance. And
Mm-hmm.
it's that substance that has become the point of discussion with the climate change issue of carbon dioxide. And we all exhaust carbon dioxide, but then plants inhale that carbon dioxide. So there's this constant and glorious, intimate exchange across, the oceans and the atmosphere, the oceans and salt, the oceans and the glaciers, the plants and the rock. It's just this beautiful fabric of life, and the weather is what keeps it in balance. When a
Mm-hmm.
part of it comes out of balance, then we begin to see the system adjusting. And whether it's adjusting by bringing cold air down, thrusting warm air farther north to cool off, that's what it does. If you're running and you've come from a standing still place, then you've got a
Mm-hmm.
breath. You've got to readjust the chemistry within your body. And the
Mm-hmm.
planet does the same thing. The oceans do the same thing.
Mm.
If there's a point of stress, it tries to either dilute the pollutant or absorb it and process it and then precipitate it out in
You
lime
know,
or limestone if we're going to continue on the carbon talk. So it's just this fabric of life, and we're a
it's
part of it
beautiful what
because
you
we're
just
alive.
said. It's beautiful. You just said something that really was key. You said when it's like when your body is stressed out, it tries to detox.
Mm-hmm.
And when we don't think the planet can get stressed out. We don't see it as a living
Yep.
organism. We see it as a thing that we're entitled to by birth and that we can just use and abuse. And in our thoughts, I want to talk about a couple of
Yeah.
things. People don't understand the science behind meteorology because they just look at a guy on the news who comes on who gets maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes per show to tell us about the big storm coming or the sunny days coming or the lows and the highs, and they're done. They don't understand the science behind that. They don't understand what they do that. And I'm wondering, can we just take a moment right now and kind of give a definition of stop calling you a weatherman, even though you are a weatherman. You're really a meteorologist. And tell us a little bit more about what that is and why is that so important?
Well, it's the study of. That's essentially what it is. And then there's the curriculum that you have to go through before the system will attribute a title. And that's
Mm-hmm.
all it is. Some of the guys that are the oldest that have been in the field have not had the quote unquote standard education, the box to be put in, but then they're the most accurate forecasters. They can see the subtleties outside of the formulas. And that's where, for me, the beauty happens, is outside the formula, outside the construct of the science part of it, because there's an art, there's a beauty, there's an intimacy to it. And that's what, as a kid, got me excited. I only got into meteorology because I wanted an easy merit badge. Straight up. That was why. I was
Okay, you
12
got
year
to
old
go and say it. I got to
and I
know.
wanted an easy merit badge to get to my Eagle Scout program so I could be done with it. I wanted that Eagle Scout, and then that freed me of the structure of scouting, and I could enjoy it for scouting alone. And so it was meteorology or weather and astronomy were my two favorite ones. Orienteering and map reading and compass, that I also really, really enjoyed. And they all kind of go together because you're finding your way amongst data, waypoints and so forth and so on. So that was how I started. And I was 12 years old. I remember it was July 1979, and I started building the weather station, the little flap wind thing. It was just literally a thin piece of cardboard in a frame. And as the gate, swept up, you could go 5 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour, 20 miles an hour, whatever it was, because it was going to,
Interesting.
very, very basic. But that started my fascination. And I was already inherently interested in numbers, arithmetic and numbers. And so I kept a weather log. And part of it is I had a bedtime. 12 years old, I had a bedtime, and that was 9:30. But that allowed me to stay up to watch the late news, and the weather
Mm.
didn't get done until 10:20. So I finangled another 50 minutes of staying up with dad, and I appreciated that time even if mom went back to the parents' bedroom a little bit earlier. So I had a couple of selfish motives for getting into weather, and one was to stay up later. But then I got to log the forecast and then what actually happened. But what do they say? How many days does it take to establish a habit? 3 weeks, about
Yeah.
21 days, and you've begun a habit. So my task was to do this for a month. So I was already at the end of this month, July 79, I was 12 and a few months old, fascinated with weather. And so I began the logging, I began the journey. And it wasn't until like 7, 8 months later that I introduced myself to the local meteorologist, and we became fast friends. I became a weather reporter and observer for for my town. And ultimately, he was my mentor for the next 6 years as I finished school, and then off to college, and then ended up working in the same television market with him, for the last 10 years of my career. So it was really kind of divine how it all played
All
out.
folded out.
Yeah.
I
And
think it's so cool, but I just got to ask you, are you telling me you were an Eagle Scout?
I was.
I think that is so way cool. It's very hard to become an Eagle Scout, and I know two of them actually. My nephew's father is a Eagle Scout, and you are an Eagle Scout, and that is just
Yeah.
that's something honorable about doing that. Thank you for that. I
And
had
I
no
had a
idea.
great scoutmaster too, and that made it really easy. We did a lot of things, and it was really important part because I grew up rural. I mean, really rural. So
Mhm.
it was good to have that. And then with parents of school teacher means that and we were all kind of in the lower income bracket, and that really helped us do things that would have never happened otherwise.
Yeah,
Whether it was camping and horseback riding and projects. So
yeah.
it was valuable. It was important.
Cool. So I want to go, and I love how we've been talking about how weather affects everything, and that people understand, hey, look at this. Good morning, good evening, friends from Kurdistan. This is Sangar. Sangar, thank you for joining us from North Iraq. Good to see you, buddy. Glad you're on tonight. So what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about confronting our future with these weather anomalies. There are so many that are happening. We can't deny that something is happening, even though we may
Right.
not quite know whether it's warming or cooling or a little bit of both.
Change.
And I'm good that it's just change. Let's
Change.
label it
It's
change.
change.
And I'm kind of wondering because I'm noticing how fierce the storms get. I'm noticing how the storms get to the point where they're a little larger and a little larger and more frequent. And I want to know if that's an anomaly, an occurrence, or what are your thoughts behind what we're seeing in these storms or changes?
I think there's two ways to look at it. One is that our data set isn't big enough to encompass a full cycle or two cycles. We're immature. Satellites have only been measuring weather conditions from space for the better part of 60 years. And we only had them in the position to then look at sea ice and Antarctic ice and Arctic ice since 1971. That's as large as the data set is. So it's just now coming up on 50 years. So that is a very, very small part of the cycle. As to magnitude, I want to say yes and no. Yes, they're bigger, but the human memory is a freakishly short thing. We can choose to forget experiences and then latch on to the most recent one as being the most extreme I remember. And so we have print media. We can look back at, say, Australian fires and go, yeah, that was bad last year, but if you look through the papers, it was equally as bad within the written record. So you can
Mm,
attach a great importance, a great emotional importance, but when it is compared to what has literally happened and on the record, it's not that exceptional. However, it does keep happening and it keeps happening, and there is let's just say there's a pollution issue. That's a given.
yeah,
There is a deforestation issue where
yeah.
the biosphere is under stress. There is problems with the chemistry of the oceans because the food chain is out of balance. Straight
Mm-hmm,
up, it's out of balance. It has been aggressively fished.
mm-hmm.
We're seeing agricultural pollutants pouring in and creating dead zones. So there's a lot of stresses that are going on, and it would be well within the organism of Earth to come in and say, I need a break. I need a
Yes.
break. I need some time to sit down and catch my breath, to let my blood, my circulation system, the
Yes.
oceans catch up with what I'm being asked to absorb. So it's well within spiritually the realm of the planet to say I need a break. And
Oh,
how does
yeah.
that get accomplished? How does it? And that was maybe part of the beauty of the COVID thing, that we saw humanity maybe not come to a full stop, but definitely slowed down by times 10. And then we're able to see the atmosphere clear out. We're able to see the life, the dolphins,
Yeah.
the
That's
animals
part
come
of the
back and see.
pandemic. Yeah.
Yes. So there was a beauty to that, because the big problem, humanity, was told, time out. Go sit in the corner. I'm not going to put a dunce hat on you, but you're going to go sit in the corner. And then you can reflect on what's happening and see, just by a 3-week, a 6-week timeout, the impact that you've had on this planet. So I think it'll get resolved. It's my belief that the age of oil and then the big pollutant will come to an end. We have the technology, as they said, as they rebuilt Steve Austin as a $6 million man. We can rebuild. We have the technology. So I think
Mm,
the willpower is building within us, this need to do something, and that is manifest by the green movements, by the extinction, protests. There's a legitimate place for them to agitate, because it's time for these changes to get underway. And
yes.
there's a lot of precursors like Tesla and with the electric car, with GM and their first excursion into electric vehicles, into so-so green energy of the wind and solar. They're not truly green. They're truly not, and they're far from 99.99% reliable. They're not. And so they're not really a stepping stone that we can count on when we need to go down that path and put the weight of society and the weight of our lives on those technologies. It will not hold us. It can't do it. But what we need are technologies that are already there. They're old, but very powerful. And that scares the people that control us, because they won't be able to extract a tax if every time, Vickie, you start up your vehicle and go down the road, you're paying them for the privilege of being able to travel. You're
Yeah.
paying them for that energy out of your labor, out of your hard work. It is a direct tax on humanity that, in my eyes, their right to taxes has expired like 50, 60, 70 years ago. And so
Hmm.
I get excited for maybe not the CO2 being the issue that breaks the camel's back, but nonetheless the concept that we need to change. And I think this COVID, this economic reset that's coming, it could end up as a terrible disaster. It could really go down one road and we end up Mad Maxy and we long for the days of reliable gasoline. I think that's possible. Or something else can step in and we can move to more of a Jetsons-like future, but with a much greater consciousness. I think there really is a fork in the road that is very, very close, and we're going to go one way or the other.
Yeah.
Either the light of liberty fails and we all descend into this totalitarian chaos, or we can power through it and stand on the future and really own it as
Mm,
spiritual beings and not consumption-oriented slaves.
yes. Beautiful. Thank you for that. I think that is a vast look at the future with some optimism as well. I want to pop here with Donnie. This is a beautiful snowstorm. Yet we've heard about the crop damage that we will between Iowa weeks ago
Yep.
and those crop losses. What are the losses here in this area of the U.S.? It does not bode well for the present food supply for humans, animals, as in pets and livestock. So yes, crop losses have been huge around the world, haven't they, based on weather?
Yeah, and there's fires that I think
Mm-hmm.
this is going to be a replay of what Australia went through our winter, last winter, which was the conclusion of their summer, where it was all the rage, and that story is just now amping up stateside.
Mm-hmm.
There was a story that came out of Spokane, Washington yesterday, and it was on Ice Age Farmer. If you haven't followed or seen Christian's work,
I love his work.
yeah, it's
Love
worthy
it.
of note. It's worthy of
Yes.
note.
If you haven't seen the Ice Age Farmer, go watch it on YouTube. And do me a favor, Karen, if you can find the Ice Age Farmer, put a link down
Yeah,
in this discussion.
he does fairly regular blogs, but his focus, and appropriately so, is on food supply and how so many of these moving parts, weather included, and policy and COVID and all these other things, and how the tax code is generated, and how property tax and all of these things, and even licensing of food and patents and big industry, it all plays into
Mhm.
food. But without a growing season, all of that becomes irrelevant. So,
Yes.
what happened in
Yes.
Spokane yesterday was another eruption of a fire, and then it burned down a granary. So there's this. All of these farmers had, they bring their harvest in. It goes into the granary, but now that is lost. Much like what happened along the Missouri River last, not this winter, but the winter prior, the flooding out and all of that surplus surface stored grains was lost. So there's just this little bit we take away. I should say there's chinks in the armor of what was, and we have grown accustomed to a food supply that is unbreakable.
Hmm.
We grew up with that,
That's right.
living in the bread belt, the wheat belt of the
Yes.
nation or the
True.
world, really, because we exported and we exported. I recall the 70s when there was this talk, a barrel of oil for a bushel of grain.
Hmm.
Why not? Why not? And now, as I watch these grain futures, corn is up, rice is up, almost near 20-year highs, and still climbing. Soybeans are up near 5-year highs. And what is interesting is that typically, because this is a Chicago Mercantile Exchange thing, you have the powers that be constantly playing long and short and adjusting those prices to suit their needs, irrespective, in many ways, of the available supply. So the commitment of traders reports is they're long. They're net long. They're more folks long, meaning they're anticipating the growth of the price. The price will grow up. That
Yeah,
food inflation will be a real thing that they can profit upon.
that's true.
And
I
that,
listened to that conversation last night on a YouTube economic show.
yep. So the big guys are now betting that prices go
Yep.
up. And when the big guys get on one side of the boat, just like they have for Amazon and Netflix and Facebook and Apple, the price goes up. But who pays the bills? And that's you and me, the consumer. So when
Yeah.
they bet on prices going up, real or imagined, our prices at the grocery store end up going up. The
Yep.
I guess the positive side for that is the prices that they pay are actually what then the farmers earn. That's the gift of this base price, because usually, if wheat goes at $3 a barrel, or $3 a bushel versus 5 and 6 right now, uh, your bread doesn't really change in price in the grocery store because that input of the grain is such a small price. You've got so many
Mm,
middlemen, the bakers, and the yeast, and the
yeah.
transportation. All of those, also fluctuate. But it's just in a way, it's good to see the farmers getting a just reward. If we still had family farmers out there.
Yeah, a lot of it is corporate. I'm going to shift right now because I think
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I want to talk about is in our world today, what is interesting, I think, is that for some reason we think that we're connected globally, but we don't understand that while being connected globally, we still have this issue where what's the word I want to say? Where when something happens over here, it now affects everything. Most of the people have been watching the pandemic, but they haven't been watching or focusing on the floods that are happening in China
Yeah.
or India or South Africa or the places where we have lots of food being made and lots of, like, they literally know there's going to be famine. And in North Korea, I think they already have famine protocols put in place. And I want to say South as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Ultimately, yeah, because they're connected.
that's right. We're all connected in that.
Yep.
But if you could just take a moment and explain the vastness of our supply chain and how it's connected and where it is so broken that people need to take an action right now.
Well, there are multiple parts to that, and the one thing that you and I, Vicki, have talked about is the banking system and
Hmm.
the U.S. dollar and the reserve currency. Without a medium of exchange, it doesn't matter where anything comes from because you can't get it aboard a ship. You
Yeah.
can't get it on a manifest. You can't achieve a letter of credit. And even with the weather changes, these suppliers say Dole Foods, which
Mhm.
brings in beans and brings in pineapple and so forth and
Mm-hmm.
so on. They're able to source those foods from somewhere else, even if they have to redeploy their own company branded ships, as I saw from Puerto Rico. Hey, there's that Dole ship out there. They left with pineapple. They left with this, they left with that. But then if Puerto Rico goes dark, then they're like, okay, then I can't even use Venezuela now because they're under sanctions. So, okay, maybe Costa Rica, maybe. And this is the thing: when you have a failure of a crop in one location, you can go source somewhere else. Usually,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what China has had to do with the sanctions here. The U.S. government, or at least Trump administration, has put on China. They've taken soybeans and they've just said, no, we're not going to deal with that from America. We'll go get them from Argentina. And then they'll literally almost even prepay these farmers. And because the incentive in yuan is so great, or maybe even dollar, because those nations still want to have trade in dollars, they'll go strip land, and we're back to a deforestation issue. We're back to carbon dioxide surge to feed China those soybeans. So I think the economic issue will probably be the one that first trumps the availability of crops. I think we're already kind of pushing the edge where we can see the my goodness, how long have we been following China and their floods since they began in early July?
Yeah.
So July, August, September. We're at least 2.5, coming up on 3 months into that, knowing that nation is going to have to go outside of its borders to find rice.
Yeah.
And 1.5 almost billion people. That's a lot of people to feed, and they had 3 crops that utterly failed. So where can you go resource that quantity of food around the
Yes.
planet? And
Yeah.
that may be impossible. So we're going to have to look for substitutes. They've had the swine flu issue where they've
Yeah.
they've
Wiped
had
out.
to kill a massive portion of what would typically be their greatest source of protein. And that's not coming back because of the floods and the continuation of the flu. So one thing that really sends nations off into war is the ability to feed their people and access to national resources.
Yeah.
That's what triggers a kinetic war. You can talk about it for years, verbally. You can then play currency games. You can, go through the tariff issues, but the next result is invasion, to
Mm.
access those resources that you want from someone else.
Yeah.
So, who knows which one's going to go first. It's my sense that we'll see the banking issue happen first, and then that will begin to greatly impact trade. And then in February, in the United States, we may not be able to get grapes from Chile.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a long way to ship that stuff, even if it's by aircraft. Boom, up and over, and it's in a day and a half, and so they're fresh and they still taste good. But I think we'll see some big issues coming up this fall. And we really kind of go through a list, family. What do you have? What's in your pantry? What do you consume? What do you go through? And I think the gift of COVID was we got to practice running that. We, had to assess what our needs are, what we
Mm-hmm.
consume, and what do we presently have on stock. So if I just, for me, the banking is going to be the biggest issue
I agree with
already.
that.
Yeah, and then we'll see what happens with local food. But this cold that hit Colorado, we had cold in, I think it was the 9th of May, and we lost a lot of the west slope, the Grand Junction, those areas, those orchards ended up with no fruit, little to no fruit. And now we've lost, or we'll see what we've lost from this early cold. There was nearly frost all the way into the North Texas Panhandle last night.
I
So
know.
we've got a
That's how
regular,
far it reached down. Nobody gets at these anomalies and how they affect us. We're just like, oh, it's the weather.
yeah, and then it's gone because
Mm-hmm.
in a way it is gone, but it leaves its trace behind. It leaves a trail of either growth and flourishment or
Mm-hmm.
destruction. This is the white death that's
Mm-hmm.
outside. It's pretty, but in September, early September at that, this is the
All
white
that
death.
crop loss.
Yeah, yeah. And we don't know how extensive it will be. Colorado's kind of a sketchy place to be growing corn anyway, especially that kind of corn that has such a long period of maturation. And when you freeze 6 weeks early, we have problems. We've got problems.
So I want to talk about. I'm gonna stretch out here a little bit because I No, there are two stories that are going on. One is that there is global warming. Without a doubt, there's global warming, all blah, blah, blah. I get that. Then there's another story that most people are not listening to, and it's called solar minimum. Solar
Mm-hmm.
minimum.
Mm-hmm.
And there's global warming and solar minimum. So I want to know, what is solar minimum? What is that about?
It's a battle between two layers of the sun, between two either destructive cells, magnetic cells, one on the top layer of the sun and another one beneath it. And when they're out of alignment, then there's great turbulence, and we see a lot of magnetic activity on the sun. We see a lot of sunspots, a lot of energy roaring out of the sun. And then when they come
Mm-hmm.
into alignment, it becomes calm and quiet. And then there's even a third layer below, and this was the mystery. There was a Russian woman just elegantly kind of teased this data, this third layer, this third variable outside of historical data. And she's created a model with it, and it is her published work that this next solar minimum runs a minimum of 65 years, but probably more likely 90 years. And then there's
Wow.
on top of other larger cycles. So what that means is that we're in a different electrical environment, a different cosmic ray environment. As the sun relaxes and chills down, then that allows other cosmic energies to come in. There's a different electrical connection between the Earth and the sun and the rest of the planets. But if we do just a correlation, not necessarily causation, because that's the missing piece. If we could prove causation, then science would be all behind it, and we would go beyond the CO2 aspect and go, OMG, the sun is it, the sun's it. But if we just jump beyond that and go to causation, then we're looking at like a Dalton minimum. So we'll back to like 1680 to about 1820. And pull that period of weather history and then apply it to beginning in about 2015. And it takes a few years to ramp up, but from other bits of information that we've gotten, it'll be about 2023 that it becomes apparent that carbon dioxide isn't doing the job that it was supposed to be doing in keeping
Mm-hmm.
us warm. And it could just be a function of Vickie, that we see these early frosts. And next year
Mm-hmm.
we see another round of early frosts. And there are so many crops left in the fields in Canada and North Dakota
Mm-hmm.
last year and the year before. So if it happens again, this will be the third consecutive year. And then you've got to say something.
Fascinating.
You've got to question what's really going on. And when that happens, then you're open to looking at other theories, other scenarios, other potentials with a less jaded or less rigid position. And that's really when scientific discovery happens, is when we let go of what we think we know, and then we can allow other ideas and concepts to come in. So the solar minimum is something that only the astronomers back in the day, back in the 16 and 1700s, were aware of, because after the beginning of the telescope, what was in the sky every single day? The moon, the planets, and the
Yes.
sun. We were
Yeah.
just beginning to see, A, what stars are, B,
Mm-hmm.
what are nebula, what are galaxies, what are these other clusters of stars? We didn't have the technology outside of a little piece of optics no bigger than, say, a 35 millimeter pair of binoculars. But when you could put a smoke glass in there and then look through the sun, you're like, oh, wow, I can do this. And the wife isn't going to get annoyed at me because I'm up till 2 a.m. So you can keep this log, and we have this very, I don't want to say rare, but precious history of sunspots and the beginning of the migrations of the sun from the higher latitudes to the center, and then it stops. And then it begins at the higher latitude of the sun
Mm-hmm.
and the southern hemisphere and northern hemisphere, and they work together, and there's this whole butterfly pattern. It's an amazing science, but it corresponded to some very cold weather in Europe. And if you throw that 300-year cycle backwards, we begin to look at the Norse and the Vikings up in Iceland and up in Greenland, and the potential that they got all the way to Newfoundland, Canada. So there's, if you open yourself up to this 350-year cycle, you're like, of course, look at this, look at this, look at this. What's
It's a
next?
cycle.
What's
Yep.
next? And how many people are on this planet right now?
So it's interesting that you're saying this, because what I'm hearing is that the growing seasons will shorten.
Yeah.
They're not lengthening, but they're shortening. And that's very interesting.
That's what
Uh,
scares me,
yeah,
because
Donnie
we're
brings that
yeah,
point here.
we're anticipating that because we're warming, that they're going to be pushed
Yeah,
longer. And
yeah,
humanity, in every single circumstance, has thrived with warmer temperatures.
yeah,
And then you get the cold, you can't feed yourself. Your caloric potential just crashes. I mean, what do we see with China? The rice is gone. And we don't know whether that was
yeah.
geoengineering, which for me is
We
another
don't know.
variable, another delta, another
Yes,
unknown that we
that's
can't
right.
ascribe a value to.
That's right.
Somebody knows, even if it's happening on a very, very tiny scale. It's a variable that isn't construed or brought into or discussed in this global discussion. So that is a blind spot that we absolutely have. And that was the one issue that made me begin to question the CO2 narrative. Because if there is this sliver of global warming happening, even if it is just a function of additional cloud cover from jet trails, then we are blind to its outcomes. We're blind to the loss
Yeah,
of the solar insulation. We're blind because we don't know what's really happening with the planet's weather. And every doctor needs to know a patient's baseline. What is the resting heart rate? How, what's the history of their weight? What's their history of their health? And if there's this little bit of geoengineering going on, and because it was a very powerful political directive in the wake of World War II, that this history of wanting to engineer the weather goes back to the end of World War II and probably before through Germany, because they had
interesting.
no problem investigating the invisible. They were fascinated by the occult and the potential of the invisible. And our American and Western science has made it foreboding to talk about investigating the invisible, because then you're into the occult and you're into the woo-woo. And my feeling
That's right.
is because there's so much power there that if we understood the power of the invisible, then we would look at the physical, we would look at medicine differently, we would look at
Yes, we
energy
look at
differently,
everything differently.
everything.
Everything.
And that's why it shall not be discussed.
Yeah. I want to empower this right here that Donnie says, because I really think this is important. The point being made is that this has happened before. Grand solar minimum is a natural cycle in our solar system. It's difficult to discern, but if you read and look deeply into our history, you will see it was devastating so much. Generations were lost and our stories were lost. I want to also, somebody asked a question here, and I want to go back up here a second. And is it here? Is it this question? Yes. Most people are listening and they're saying, you know what? So what, Scott? This is all happening. Big deal. I got to find a way to feed my family. I got to find a job. I got to find what do you say to those people? And let's make it over the next decade, because we have a culmination of things happening. We have supply chain disruptions. We have a pandemic. We have financial debt and insecurity and uncertainty. We have job losses, AI, robotics, and we now have this weather anomaly,
Yeah.
all in this package, I think, over a decade. It's not going to be 10 days, 10 months. It's the full decade. What
If
would you
I
say
could
to these
if I
people?
could go back 1 year and know
Mm.
what I know now, there's a person, Donnie's always talked about greenhouses. That would have been the
Mm-hmm.
one thing that would have protected us from the white winter, the white death that I'm looking at outside right now. The
Mm-hmm.
one thing. And how long does that take to put together, to manufacture? And if we're talking about a banking, merchandise, transportation issue, because we've lost our ability to produce locally, and we still consume locally, but we source globally. If we can source locally, then we could build a greenhouse over a weekend. It would be an impressive weekend, but we could do it over a weekend. But if we can't get plastics, if we can't get a transparent membrane to separate the inside from the outside, then it almost becomes an impossible task. Then you do what the pioneers do, you do what the settlers do, you did what the ancient ones did, and they relocate.
Yeah.
what else can you do? It makes, the place becomes uninhabitable for the type of calories and the
Yeah.
food that you need. You just
Dust Bowl.
repurpose your land.
Hmm.
If all we had to do was graze meat eaters or graze animals and then we consume the meat, then it'd be fine. This would not be a big deal. Still have skins, we'd have proteins, we'd have those fatty tissues, because what did we do around the fire after a hard day's work? We'd chew the fat. We'd chew the fat. We didn't have a salad. We chewed the
Yeah,
fat.
chew the fat.
We
That's
chewed the
right.
fat. So you either migrate or you adjust the climate locally so you can produce those foods that you require. That's the only two options. That's really what it's coming down to. So, and building a smaller enclosure, and I wouldn't even say small, because if the changes are as they appear they're going to be, you'll need something substantial to where
Yeah.
you can through the winter here in Colorado, where we have so much sunshine, you can grow indoor greens. You can grow greens
Yep.
all through the winter. There's enough
We do.
sunshine to do that.
Yep.
Other places, not so much, because the cold is just too intense. So you migrate or you create your own microclimate, and that takes technology. And it's best to do it while you have available resources. Yeah.
I like this. I'm not sure who this is, but I think it's Anna because it's got that little red heart.
Yeah.
While I love you too, I think you're poking fun at the other, Scott. It did get me to watch some of this though. And I like that. That's good, because it's always this perspective of being open to learning new details. And there are some of the, offsettings of what people believe in, the science behind it, and what's actually happening and what you need to do. I mean, greenhouse, big, important. Are you moving? Are you staying? It's like right now, I think one of the most important things you can have is freedom and mobility, the ability to go where you need to go,
One of
and
the
take
things,
your income with you.
it's unfortunate because we're talking about science over here. Who pays for the science?
Mm-hmm.
That's the
Mm-hmm.
unfortunate thing right now, is that it is not decentralized like it may have been in the past. It is very centralized. You have the National Science Foundation, and they fund so much research, but it comes with strings. Just like the EPA and other agencies prior to the explosion of fracking, they needed that oil, and they needed the science to say that it was safe to frack and to inject all of those wastewater products into the water table. They had to have the science corrupted so they could get the outcome that they wanted. And when you have an agenda that is as grand as the Club of Rome or Agenda 21 or all of these other UN funded, their annual budget is, I don't even
Lots of
want to
money.
say. Yeah, it's a lot. It's really, really high. But it's all to bring humanity under one umbrella. And as an ignorant dude in his 20s, I thought the unification of Europe and that open transit was a beautiful thing, and it was for a while. But then
Now it's a big
sovereignty,
failed experiment.
yeah, sovereignty was sacrificed
Yeah.
for the greater whole. And it's sold like a box of cereal. It's sweet and it's tasty, but there's just nothing in it for you that is lasting. That's not good. Greenhouses need to be more complex. There's a guy in Nebraska who grows oranges all
Wow.
year round. But his
Because it's
greenhouse isn't
greenhouse.
exposed on 6, 7 sides to the elements. He's dug into the ground. So you can have the planet
Interesting.
that's, yeah, as a thermal battery. And that is so important that you can protect yourself against a good cold Arctic outbreak of minus 20. That down 10 feet, you're still being able to draw in 50, 55-degree air. And then you can supplement it with solar. You can supplement it with some other heat source, or even light if needed. But you've got to get dug into the ground. These big exposed sources or walls are just take too much energy. You got to cool it in the summer and you've got to heat it in the winter. They're not smart. They're not sustainable. We'll get there, but it's going to take more stress. It's going to take more loss, and it's going to take more brave people, YouTubers that are showing you how to do this. And it's the old guard. It's the wisdom. It may not be the properly schooled guys that are the degreed ones, but it's the ones that have access to the invisible, where they take the idea, they take that inspiration, And like the guy who had Donnie can pop up his name, the Earthships that have the Earthship farm or community down
Mhm.
in Taos, New Mexico. He was inspired to show people how to build homes. And if we've got a warmer climate, that helps too, because you've
Mhm.
got big, thick, 6, 7 foot
Yeah.
earthen walls to keep away from the heat. I remember I went to second and third grade in Gallup, New Mexico, where my dad was teaching, and one of the things that my science teacher taught us were these adobe hogans. And so we built little mud baked adobe hogans as a hands-on science experiment, and they built adobe hogans to keep the heat out and to keep the heat in. So we've got to completely do away with this 2x4, this timber building, and it's just not generational homes that you can go deep into debt and then pass on to your kids. It's just I'm excited for the change. It's going to be a little painful, but like we started the show off with, Vic, I hope we don't go Mad Max. That we can actually go through and do this in a very
And
powerful
thank you.
spiritual way.
Thank you. A powerful spiritual way. Look at this, what came up. Hey, Linda, nice to see you on, my friend. I love this comment right here, and I love her wisdom. Acting while there are resources is critical, as is having a positive mindset. You got that right.
Yep.
Anyone who doesn't already have gardening, canning, and other homesteading skills should acquire them right now. And I
Must.
cannot tell
Must.
you how important this is to me. You guys have heard me say it. You've seen me do it. We've made videos and take pictures. I think this is one of the most important skills that you can have right now. Gardening, canning, and other homestead skills should acquire them. And doesn't it just go without saying that we all need multiple streams of income and the ability to work from anywhere? And this is the thing, freedom and mobility. And that's these are the skills of the future. There's a guy, Chris Martenson, whom I absolutely love. I think he's got one of the best podcast shows. If you haven't seen it, put Chris Martenson below, put his link down below. This
Peak
guy, a
prosperity.
big, yeah, peak prosperity. This guy is a big time Wall Street scientist, et cetera. He's got a doctorate degree in some sort of science of disease or something like that. I can't remember what it is. But he left everything to do his home business, which he does. He's got his show and everything else. And he's got this fabulous garden in the back. And that's all he's talking about right now. And the thing about that is, when we say, what is having a positive mindset? And right now, one of the things I think that's so important about having that is a positive mindset is going to view everything. And right now, you're going to sink or swim. In the future, you're going to sink or swim based on your attitude, based on your perspective, based on anyone or who doesn't have these skill sets of gardening, canning, and other homesteading skills should acquire them, including homeschooling, because we may see a lot more of that coming up.
Yep.
But when you're looking at the future, a positive mindset isn't somebody who sticks their head in the sand. It's somebody who looks and says, oh, I see the storm on the horizon. This is what I must do to get that, ready for that storm. And that is the most important thing I think we can take a look at. Linda, thank you. I love the insights here. I love your perspective, and I loved your point of view as well. That was really important. And I think Donnie has that same importance. He's like, get your greenhouse up, learn how to do it now, get your gardening up. It's like these shortages, these things have happened. The pandemic happened, the financial markets happened. We all know the world, not the United States, the world is going to go through a season of winter. It's a season of slowing. And this season is spiritual. We drop our consumerism and we start becoming a little more simplistic in our lives. We like the simple things and the simple joys, a cup of coffee and a conversation with a friend. We're not working to the point where we're working for just absolutely to pay off our debt because we are so addicted to consuming. And
Labor
I
will
like
once.
this.
I think labor will once again have value. Labor
Yes.
is profoundly mispriced. When you set a minimum rate on the value of a person's hourly wage, you
Yeah.
completely distort the labor market. It should, and that's one thing that I know will get reset. There are hard workers out there that can't get jobs above or just beyond minimum wage, and that does
Yeah.
them no service and does not value their contribution
And
to the families and to the world at large.
there's going to be a significance coming back in the world to the handyman.
Yeah.
Now, in the 70s, we used to have handymen, and handymen had several skills. They didn't have
Yep.
just one skills. It wasn't just plumbing or just wiring or just, the handyman would come and have several skills. And somehow we've lost that skill in there, having handymen, people who can do mechanics and engineering and earn a great wage to do that as well. Donnie says, yes, we are the solution. We really are.
Yeah,
Thanks for the wisdom and sharing. Have a great day, everyone. I have to get back to work. Thank you for joining us today. And I really think there is, let's see what we got here. Here are a few options for earthship models. I mean, these are things where you can put things in the ground. And I think farming, everyone is going to go back to having some sort of farm, and you have to acquire these skills.
If you don't, you're going to have to trade something for your food.
Mm-hmm.
That's that is so critical, as you said in the book earlier, Cash Flow Secrets. You had a trade and you had your farm. You
Yeah.
had to feed yourself, so your
Yep.
trade allowed you some free income to then trade.
Yeah.
Basically.
There was a lot there. I want to let you know, Ice Age farmer and peak prosperity. Chris Martenson, definitely somebody that everyone should listen to. Such a smart and really serving humanity.
Yeah.
Really serving humanity as a whole. I really appreciate him. I'd love to get him on the show, actually. Last night, many lost their crops. But if greenhouses were the norm, even a small greenhouse attached to your home to help warm it, but also utilize your carbon dioxide that you create now, that is an aspect of the symbiotic relationship. I just want to say thank you so much. This has been so enlightening, Scott. I think that so often we don't allow ourselves the ability to learn more and get a more vast perspective. But as I grow and as I learn and as I talk with you, I have fundamentally seen the symbioticness of the universe and the earth and its weather patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you said something that was so valuable to me, and I want to share it again because I think it's so important. The earth needs a break, and she took one.
She took one.
The earth took a break, and she is resting in a way and will continue to rest until we somehow wake up. And this is our opportunity to reevaluate ourselves, restructure our lives, and recreate something that is healthier, just all around healthier.
You do it by choice, or you're forced into a position where you have to go through the consequences of those decisions. And right now, a greenhouse is just a very small insurance policy.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Thank you, my friend, for having my back always and jumping on with us.
pleasure.
It was great to see everybody online today. Please, if you think this show is valuable, please share it out, because the more people that know what is going to happen, the more time we help them have to make something happen for themselves. And this is so important. I just want to pop here because people are talking. And, Susie has this really cool little story here. All my family is in Escanaba, Michigan, have farms, maple syrup, plant bulbs that they sell around the world. This is fascinating. There are some food warriors out there who are protecting the species of plants we have, the species of roots that we have. To all those Earth Planet warriors, thank you for your service to humanity. And to everyone else, if we could just change just a couple of small habits right now, you'd be able to get to the future a little bit easier. I want to let you know we do have a book coming out, Scott and I do. We told you about this before, but it is Sink or Swim 2030. It's a guide to getting through the next decade and what you're going to need. Thank you, sir, for being on with me today. I appreciate you all. Tomorrow is Thursday, and I want to let you know at 10 a.m., not 11, at 10 a.m., I am going to be on Kathy Mason's show on her channel. So we'll put a link to that in the group down there. And then at 11, we're going to be live here for the Coffee Break Show. Thank you guys. Mwah. Peace out. I'll see you later. Really, go plant a garden, get your greenhouse together.